Guys, if there's one thing I like about Dynatrace is the music. Also, always makes you feel like you're in rock concerts or
like a party.
yeah. You should have seen perform. Yeah, but so
That's one heck of a party.
yeah, maybe next time. So hi everybody, I'm Liran. I'm a product architect at Dynatrace. I was working on the Live Debugger project. With us we have Sharon. You want to present yourself?
Hi guys, I'm Sharon Sharlin, and I'm the go-to-market lead for developer experience.
And Omer, you want to go ahead?
And finally, my name is Omer. I'm a developer for the Live Debugger in the Dynatrace and for the One Agent as well.
So it's great to have you here for the Ask Me Anything. It always go. I'm hoping we have tons of people in the audience who are listening in and have tons of questions. So feel free to type in your questions wherever you're listening from, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or whatever. We're looking forward to answer your questions. Otherwise, it just feels like it's us talking to ourselves. Let's see how it goes. So kind of today's topic is about the new Live Debugger feature. And Sharon, you mentioned you're kind of working on the go-to-market. So I think this has been a focus point of yours for quite a few months now.
Yes. Obviously, we were all preparing for this moment for quite a while. Me coming from Rookout, it's even a longer journey because for me it's like a second birth. Now it's Dynatrace Live Debugger. And indeed, it was super exciting to present how it's going to be and perform with the Live Debugger web app and its two IDE plugins with both VS Code and IntelliJ. The GA was in April. And the trend now is continuing and rising, and we see more and more adoption, even though it's just like a month's time into availability. So yes, very exciting.
So that's great, Sharon. And hey, Ahmad, it's great having you with us. If anyone else is listening, feel free to drop in where are you from and what are you tuning in for. Now, while the audience kind of says hello and starts coming up with crazy questions about Live Debugger, maybe we zoom out for a second and Sharon, you tell us a bit more about how does developer experience fit in a Dynatrace as a whole?
Yeah, of course. If you wouldn't ask us, I would probably raise it myself. So developer experience is a foggy term, and everybody looks at it in a different direction. So there's developer experience for the developers that are building the Dynatrace application. And maybe we can talk about it in a later session, like a day in a life in a Dynatrace developer, but not today. And there's a developer experience for engineers that want to build upon on top of the Dynatrace platform, want to build their own application, and we also allow them to do it. So what type of experience do they have? And obviously it's very dear to our heart that they will have a beautiful experience. And again, we're not going to talk about this today. So we're going to talk about developer experience from the user perspective, users that are using the Dynatrace platform, application, telemetries, analytics, and what type of experience do they have. Today, in a modern software development world, it's not easy to release quality software in a timely manner, and we want to make sure that the experience the developers get is superb from both use cases, from both real-time capabilities. Things like troubleshooting and debugging that we will talk deeper in a moment are far more complex today. Applications are distributed. Everything is in the cloud, ephemeral. We don't really know where the error lies, what instances, in how many instances. So it is a bit of a challenge, and we want to make sure that we make the life of our developers, users, easier, faster. In the end of the day, it's not only helping them, it's helping the entire surrounded departments, reducing MTTR, removing friction between the different teams. So we will dive into the developer value, but there are also values for many different aspects and personas in the organization. So yes, for us, developer experience is to make the developer's life easier. We want them to be happy.
And just maybe to describe my own experience, because while I'm still like a developer for Dynatrace, I'm also just a developer, right? And so I've been able to use the product and describe in my experience. When we say developer experience, we don't only mean that, yeah, developers will have an easy time doing things and they'll be happy. It also means they'll have an easier time actually finding bugs, actually getting to the root cause analysis, doing it quickly, ensuring stability for their systems, right? It's not only just comfort that we're enabling here.
Yeah. And it's important to know that we have tons of features where we want to see from the developer mindset and perspective. It can be about logs, it can be about scans, it can be about profiling. Tons of features we have in there. But I think in some ways, Live Debugger is at this point the most prominent developer-focused feature, the one that's very much out there for developers and not as much for other users, I would say. That's really a feature we are targeting developers first and foremost. And what is it really about? What's Live Debugger? What's Live Debugger? We keep saying about it. That's kind of focus beyond breakpoints, but what does it actually mean?
Are you referring to the question to me or to Omer?
Whatever, I can answer that as well. Like when we talk about live debugging, right? I mean, most developers know about debugging like in general in their ID, right? You have like an issue in your code, you have like a bug, and you want to find out how you do it. The way people usually did it with normal debugging is they would get a setup on their local computer, try to put a breakpoint at a specific location, hope that it will be triggered by whatever action they're doing, but then everything stops, right? We don't allow our service to run, the breakpoint stops everything. The main advantage that we have for live debugging is basically we offer the same insights of normal debugging, which is what's the state of my program at the time that an issue happened, without stopping the program, allowing us to actually do debugging in production and not having to always try to come up with a local reproducer. That's, at least in my eyes, one of the main points of the live debugger.
Yeah, I can think of a few other use cases. Obviously, Omer, what you just mentioned is the most prominent one, troubleshooting and debugging.
Yeah.
But we can also use Live Debugger for whatever, exploratory analytics, just to verify that something is happening or not happening. So I can easily just get in, set a breakpoint, and see live from whatever environment what I'm looking for. So this is just one thing. Live Debugger can be used for quick onboarding, because one of the biggest challenges when we onboard a new developer to the team is like, is he familiar with that piece of code, with that app, with whatever? Shall we send someone else to do this checking, this optimization, this troubleshooting? And now there's no more need to be that familiar with the code in details, because we can just fetch whatever debug data that we want from wherever environment. And this is also very, very crucial for VP engineering and others that care about the productivity of the entire team. Quick onboarding means better productivity. So it's also a very strong use case. Other use cases that I can think of is recognize testing in a better way. Like usually when we want to test something, we don't always have the visibility to see how it's done. It's more of a black box. And now that we have the Live Debugger, again, we have visibility and instant understanding of whatever is happening with our code, and we can better tweak those tests to fit to our specific needs. It's like testing in wet and not blind. So again, we can think about many use cases, and I think that the preview program that we just finalized, we had many customers, and with every other customer, we were amazed to see how different do they use the Live Debugger. And not only solely, they kind of integrate it into their entire observability machine. So it was very interesting and cool to see all those different integration and usage, starting from problem, getting into seeing logs, getting to dive deeper into the code level. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
One point that actually I want to talk about what you just said is that you mentioned testing. And one of the nice things that we can do with the Live Debugger actually is to validate our testing data with real-life examples. Placing a breakpoint in your production code and actually getting real data and not mock data that may or may not actually represent the actual core business and the core logic is tremendous in making sure your systems are more robust, are more representative of the real world, allow you to better identify what should you actually aim towards when you optimize things. Let's say you have 3 different types of messages, right? And each one takes a different code path. But if only one message is most of the logic, and you know that from your real data, then you know where to look for improvements.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at its core, if you think about most observability signals out there, which is obviously, traces, logs, and spans, and metrics, they tend to be very rigid. It's the same data day in, day out. Maybe somebody very smart designed the data and selected the data, and maybe it's answering some of the questions. But when you come up with new questions every day, and I hope you do, because the more you ask, the more you know your code, then you're not going to find the answer to all of those questions in those predefined rigid data. And sometimes you will find it, but it will require a lot of work in deducing and converting and analyzing. And instead, you could just, set a breakpoint somewhere and get the data you're really after within seconds. Now, we keep talking about debugging, and Dynatrace is a very nice. We just got a very nice and long question. Let me just take it in.
We'll take a second to read it, maybe.
If you highlight it.
Yeah. Maybe I'll talk while you read the question, Liran. So, that's.
Maybe we'll take a second to explain why it's so. Why we're so happy with providing all this Live Debugger application, which reside inside observability for developer as a package, as an offering, which we also launched lately. So there's a big need in the market for developer-specific solution because observability has changed dramatically from what it used to be. Like it used to cover, let's say, the big 3 logs, traces, metrics, and it used to provide 2 mainly ops-related position and persona that used to ask like a very constant questions that we could provide them with beautiful dashboards, with alerts about whatever is happening with their CPU, with their memory, things that we can anticipate and provide answers in advance. But developers needed something else, needed the real-time data because they need to tackle unknown situation. Everything regarding developers is not something that you kind of can tailor in a box and just get a dashboard to alert you when something happened. Since we don't know what's going to get wrong. So we need real-time capabilities. And this is why we're so happy with providing this package to the market, and it includes many elements that developers need. Obviously logs, obviously distributed tracing, profiling, exception analysis, and also this real-time data from whatever environment that is coming from the live debugger, that really coupled everything together and allow us to provide developers with the power of the platform, the power of the telemetries and analytics, also in real time. So this is kind of, in a nutshell, why that piece was missing, why the market was craving to get it. We always had in Dynatrace features and power for developers, but it was never in a tailored and focused way as it is today with those packages and features and plugins. Sorry, Liran, I was interrupting you in the middle of this long question.
So, yeah, no worries. It's always great to hear you. So Mathan asked a question about debugging SQL statements that are returning inconsistent results between execution environments. Now, specifically for custom extensions, we don't allow debugging at the moment because we don't yet support Python with Live Debugger, but for Java, Node, and soon .NET, you can debug the environment that's sending out those SQL statements. You can debug it both before the statements get executed, after the statement gets executed, seeing the result. You can also debug, if needed, into the database driver, whether it's a commercial database driver or an open source database driver. You can set breakpoints inside the driver to see what's going on. All of that can provide you with a lot more context about what's going on, which query actually gets executed, which results actually gets returned, and is there something in the code execution environment that's changing the result you're getting somehow in an unpredictable manner. We keep talking about the debugging and the importance of debugging, and Dynatrace is a web platform, and there is a web debugger app within the system, which is important. Yeah, by the way, Live Debugging is a new gateway for this level system topology. That's a very interesting.
Hi, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. That's actually a very interesting use case. I think Sharon touched upon it briefly. We actually see a lot of people using live debugging to learn more about their code, about how it's being used, and how it's being connected. Do you guys have any stories you want to share about that?
Yeah, I do actually. So as you know, like in today's world, right, we have different services in our backend, and some of them are in my team responsibility, and some of them are in other teams' responsibility. And we usually have like an API between the two, but sometimes that API might misbehave, right? Now, not all the times I can reach the respective team. And when that happens, I can actually debug their API, their service quite easily. I can connect both my service, like my code, and their version of the code as well, and debug both at the same time. And I can learn pretty easily, just from the data that's coming from my app to their API and so on, what's going exactly at their service, allowing me to onboard myself pretty much.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, sometimes when looking at the service of a different team, maybe you're not sure which repository it's coming from. You probably definitely don't know which version is deployed, and you quite often don't have any idea on how to build, run, deploy that service. So kind of, how do you go about just debugging the service? How do you know which code to look into and all of that?
So that's the great part. I don't need to. With live debugging, it automatically detects like which version the code that you're trying to debug, like that has Dynatrace on it. It detects the version, both the version and the repository. And inside the app itself, the live debugger app, we fetch the actual code so you can see the exact version, the exact commit that is running at any service you want.
Mm-hmm. And this is integrated directly into your GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever.
Whatever you want. Yeah.
So all you have to do as a user is select a service, whether it's your service or service from some other team in your organization. You can just dive into the code, start debugging.
Click it. Yeah. That's the great thing, right? Because think about it, like the entire point of being onboarded in something is that you're not familiar with which version they're using, whether like the service you're trying to debug is actually using a specific older version because the pod it's running on is too old. So it basically saves you the trouble of pinging 3 different people in your company because each one is responsible for a different piece of data over how everything is deployed. You just let the debugger do it. We do it usually by reading like the Git configuration of the URL and the version hash, the commit, and then you get a code.
Yeah. Now, Mark is asking about how are we detecting it from the metadata. So
Yeah.
we have multiple detection mechanisms, both at the binary level as well as the container level. If auto detection fails, you can always configure it yourself using environment variables. And we're also actually working on further adapting and tuning with the OCI spec for even better and more integrated container support as part of the Dynatrace operator. Now Ahmad asked about complex environments and different teams, different backends. How does it help understand? Do you want to maybe, I can give you more specific examples. It's as simple as, let's say you are saying some API misbehaving and you got as far as having a curl command that replicates the issue. You send the request, you expect A, you get B, but now the API is a black box. And you could try to build it on your machine, but that would require you to check out the repository, figure out how to build it, hoping it's actually built on your operating system, and that they're not, for some reason, using that other team is using some other operating system, and you have to figure out how to build it, and then run it, and connect it to a database, and so on and so forth. Instead, you can just pinpoint Live Debugger at that specific endpoint, your service you're debugging, set a breakpoint on the endpoint, and then you can see it happening in action. You can see how your inputs are being received by that service. You can see your outputs. You can dive in deeper into deeper functions and go as deep as you want to see how things are operating. And if you want to, you can then get a lot more context. Maybe you figure it out yourself. Maybe you can provide more context to the team you're working with about things once you have a better grasp of the situation.
And also, let's take a look at all the things you just said. All of them probably take a lot of time, right? Getting to the correct version of the different repository, fetching it, building it, setting up the database. Why do all that when you can easily just place a breakpoint and save you a lot of time, right?
Yeah, it's always a better place to start. Just instead of trying to replicate that, instead of trying to build a new environment where you're free to operate as you see fit, just debug in the environment that's where the issue is occurring, whether it's a development environment or a production environment. Just go directly to the source, go to where you see the problem, and observe the code in action, instead of trying to waste so much time and effort reproducing it in a more convenient environment.
You asked why not. Well, there are some concerns, like for us that are familiar with the product and are not afraid with
I trust myself.
and dynamic instrumentation. and all those fancy words. But people are afraid of a couple of things. First of all, performance. They don't know if they're going to get performance hit from activating Live Debugger, from placing breakpoints, what's going to happen. So it's one thing that people are afraid of, and we will address that. Obviously, it's minimal, and it's like put in a log line. And the other thing is their source code. It's like something that we care deeply. It's our property, and suddenly someone else is like touching our source code. Then we also need to address that, and it's clear and natural. Then the answer is no worries. We don't possess or hold your source code. The source code stays within the user browser, and the debug data, those snapshots, the results of the Live Debugger activation are kept like for specific amount of time for the troubleshooting time. And if privacy is one of the things that you are concerned, then we can also mask the data. So that it. I kind of touched all the concerns of why not, and it's really not why not. It's maybe more how to, like, how do I configure this and that, and for what time do I going to keep the debug data, etc. So once we realize that those concerns are met, no other reason why not to. The value is huge.
Yeah. Now, as Mark pointed out, and maybe Carrie can flash it, that many developers don't have access to the databases, to the environment, and there are good reasons they don't have those access, because that access is often much more scary and risky than everything we're describing here. Because if you get database access, you can take down the system. By the way, not only with write access, also with read access, you can lock the database and cause issues. Developers don't get access to machines, definitely not in enterprise environments, quite often not even in lower environments. So, and there is a good reason for that. And quite often, what we end up seeing is that DevOps teams and security teams and operation teams are kind of hassling around with access requirements. And people are asking for more access, or people are asking somebody with access to just let me SSH into that machine, get me that file, get me that dump, get me that log, run that database query for me and see why it doesn't work. And there's a lot of work that often gets assigned to the people who have access. That's mostly grunt work, uninteresting work that just, because they happen to have access, they need to enable the people without access. And so this is a way that allows, honestly, much more secure, limited access into those environments without putting as much effort on those teams, and without, well, there are always risks, but significantly less so.
I think that it's going to get worse now with AI. Applications are going to be even more shielded and isolated, so the need is even getting bigger.
So Mark is asking which is the most complementary app with Live Debugger. So kind of like to take your take on this. Which of the apps seems most collaborative to you when it is Live Debugging?
I think it really depends on the use cases. I heard that many likes the to attach to problems, many like it to attach it to services, take the debug data to dashboards. Like, you can do so many things. So it really, I think, use case related and position related. And we will have data soon. There's nothing better than that. We will have statistics about how users are coupling Live Debugger with what applications.
So one thing I particularly like about traces is that you already have that, because Dynatrace tracing is so deep, you quite often already have file name or class name and even line number on your spans. So quite often you get pretty close to a line of code where you know that something interesting is happening, whether it's a slowness or a failure or whatever it is that interests you. And then you can just jump right into Live Debugger. You know the service, you know the file name, you know the line number, and you can continue investigating by collecting additional data on top of what's already available in those rich traces.
I just want to point out maybe one thing that isn't exactly the question of Mark, but he mentioned login, right? And I think while the login application is not directly connected to the Live Debugger, it is complementary in a way, because you can think of basically the non-breaking breakpoints as like a temporary log line in your code, which won't stay there for a long time. Let's say you want to add a new log line to a new service, and you know it will be a pretty busy service, right? So one of the things you're probably saying to yourself, okay, I really want that log line, but I know no one will approve that because it will take a lot of money to just add that one, right? It will spam the logs, it will make everything unreadable. Thanks to the snapshots that are collected from the Live Debugger, you can add a temporary log line over there and use that to further enhance your other logs temporarily.
Yeah, you mentioned about approving logs and potentially dangerous logs. So a while back, I ran my podcast, Production First Mindset, and I had a guest that shared with me that one of their updates was a total failure due to a log line that included the null dereference. And it was a bit of a hardware company, so that update actually bricked some machines as a result of a bad log line, and those machines were worth a lot of money. So yeah, log lines can get dangerous, so you need to be careful about adding them. It's code, and even the simplest line of code can have unexpected impact
And just maybe to expand like on what I said before, like I just as breakpoint, right? But who says that breakpoint won't cause the same as a log, basically? Like it will spam everything, it will make everything slower, and so on and so on. So luckily we do have like some defense mechanism for that, right? We don't want that extra breakpoint to be added by some user and forgotten for the rest of the time. So we've added basically like a whole bunch of defense mechanism, like whether it's we don't allow a breakpoint to be executed indefinitely. We don't allow it to be kept like for as long as forever. We do set a time limit. We also make sure that all of your breakpoints don't take too much of your time, because at the end of the day, they're complementary to your application. They're not just like your breakpoint, I want it and I want the data, right? You want your application to run. Getting the data is a great addition, but we don't want to take the focus from your application.
Yeah, so no matter what, observability shouldn't hurt the performance of the application.
Yeah, precisely.
It's actually a very nice question. So, Omer, you want to start?
Wait, I want to read it first. Now, the debugging integrate with CI/CD pipelines to ensure the debugging insights are not only captured but also fed back in the development and testing. You want to maybe take this one while I think about it?
Yeah, so I can answer this. First, actually, something you touched upon and also Sharon touched upon is about test data. Quite often when creating tests, you have to use mock data or think about which cases you want to test. Now, obviously, if you're writing a new line of code in a new system where you have no data, then you have to start from scratch and make it up yourself. But quite often you are adding a function to an existing system or adding a test to an already existing system and observing the code and execution and data that flows through at this point in the system before you make the change can provide you great insights about which data and what to test. And so you can easily get that data. You can capture the data You can even export it if your security allows it, and then feed it directly into your tests wherever you need to. Additionally, you can also directly debug those CI/CD tests that are running on those Jenkins environments, which are often ephemeral, can be very hard to Jenkins or Cloud or GitHub Actions or whatever it is. I'm not judging, but you can always just spin up one agent there and debug those environments remotely if something is failing there. Quite often, especially, again, it can be quite challenging sometimes to set up those testing environments locally or to run specific tests locally or to make it fail locally. So in all of those cases, you can just live debug the remote environment in the CI/CD pipeline without being restricted to whatever is easily done on your machine. But we haven't really touched upon it, but Dynatrace is a web platform, and pretty much most of our apps are there in the web for our users, which is nice. But live debugging is a bit different than that, right?
You're now touching one of the biggest pains and challenges in developers' life, which is kind of losing context, right? When I need to do something and then I want to capture or collaborate, and then I find myself switching screens, copying links. Well, in the end of the day, the Live Debugger application is now coming with 2 plugins. So everything can be catered, and we actually have the plugin there. So everything can happen in my IDE. So I don't need to go anywhere. I can stay in whatever, VS Code or the JetBrains family, and I can live debug there. So this is super powerful, for my opinion, because losing context is very, very painful. It's losing time. It's not just context, because this is what it actually means. And when I feel comfy and familiar with the zone that I usually work in, it's always better. And I can never forget that this possibility is there, because it's handy and it's there. So yeah, it's coming a little bit different, this application, but it's also available as a web app. So I can always use it in whatever fashion that I prefer.
So
yeah, maybe just like adding as a developer, like I spend most of my time in my IDE. Like I'm used to it. I'm fluid with using it. So most of the things that I can bring to my IDE, I try to bring it. Whether it is my day-to-day job of writing new code, reviewing other people's code, thinking about tickets in Jira, right? We have different applications. They're all connected to my IDE. And basically, the great thing that we're bringing here is we're not only talking about your inner cycle of development cycle, we're also bringing higher environments into your IDE, also bring production, bringing testing environments directly in my IDE without having to do all sorts of tricks to connect into whatever process I need. I also log my IDE every day.
I don't.
Oh, what's your IDE?
I'm mostly using the JetBrains products.
On Linux.
Good.
On Windows.
Windows, really?
But I have teammates that are using Linux.
Yeah, everybody in your team is using Linux for some reason. I mean, I know the reason, but let's leave it off now.
That's for another Risk Manager.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's pretty cool. And I know one other use case we keep hearing about from customers and users. By the way, ask questions, please do. We're here for you. But one question I know comes up in every conversation I'm in is about debugging open source projects and third-party libraries. And how can you go about that with Live Debugger?
Right. So let's say you're noticing some strange behavior in your production code, right? You go like into your code, you try to debug it like you usually do with the live debugger because you're used to it by now. And you've come to the place where you think there is an issue, you think there is some function that is called incorrectly, you check the snapshot data and you see everything is correctly. You go to the documentation of whatever third-party library you're using, it sounds like everything should work, except it doesn't, right? So that's like a common scenario that happens every once in a while. So actually, the great thing is that not only can you debug your code, we allow you to debug third-party libraries as well by actually bringing their code into your web app as well, into your debug environment, and debugging at that place. We can do it like different ways. Either one is fine. One way is if you're like having a stack trace that a third-party library, let's say Jetty, right, is calling your controller, and you feel something is iffy, you can put a breakpoint up the stack, and observe the data over there, and then you can also, in another way, bring the actual source code of Jetty and debug that one.
Mm-hmm. So you can debug third-party codes, and you don't have to worry about building it or editing it to add a log line or good stuff. Just pull out the code, start debugging, and go for it.
Your only worry is opening the relevant tickets in the third-party library.
I have opened my share of those. They don't always get satisfactory answers. But yeah, it's open source. Can't complain if you're not paying for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we have Kerry. Can you pull up that the question about the resolution of production issues again? Because actually, that's a question we get quite often about the impact of live debugging and the impact it makes. So on the plus side, yeah, that's the one. So on the plus side, I can say that we are hearing customers say that I've seen improvements of 10x and more in the time it takes to resolve issues. Obviously, it can be even more in the amount of resources they spend, because often one person can get the job done for something that would require a team, because one person can go over the code quickly and doesn't rely on a lot of knowledge or on experience or on guesswork or whatever. You just debug through the code, figure it out, and doing it in 1/10 of the time.
However, even more. It's public knowledge, but TELUS company, they told us that they reduced their troubleshooting time, mean time to identification, multiple 20. So it's huge.
Amazing.
Yeah. The problem is that not all engineering organizations are so good at tracking those metrics. I mean, once people track those metrics, we can often see huge improvements, but we can't be, at least for now, as a company, we're not tracking those metrics for our customers. Maybe something to do in the future.
Yeah. But one thing that maybe like won't be enough for like C-level, right? Because for usually you need like hard metrics, hard KPIs to present. But one thing is that people usually I hear of when debugging is they found like a bug in production. They think they found a solution. They're not entirely sure, but they wanna still push it to production because they're losing money while the bug is there. So they push a fix and they place breakpoints in the area of that bug to actually see the new data that is coming and making sure it's what they're expecting, that the bug is solved actually. That's something we see a lot of customers do because, once again, like I said before, you add a breakpoint, you can forget about that one. It will be removed soon. So you can do it very quickly, unlike a log where you usually would add a log, and then in the next version of your application, you'll have to remove that log and have to remember to remove that log.
Or you're going to keep paying for it forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
Mark asked questions about collaborating in Live Debugger, about how can two engineers work on it at the same time. And there are actually a couple of answers to that. First, I think one of the nice things actually is about how people work separate from each other, because quite often when you're debugging, you have to set up entire machines for yourself, because I'm debugging this environment, so nobody else is allowed to touch it. Because if I'm debugging it, first you can only touch a debugger, but anybody else touching my environment is gonna mess things up for me. Stay away from it. And we often see customers setting up huge environments and having to maintain them and time share them between engineers and all of that. It can get very, very messy. Now, but for live debugging, we actually give each developer their own session, each engineer their own session. They can set their breakpoints, they can get their data. They're not interrupting each other. We're making sure that no breakpoints slows down or prevents other breakpoints from working. So you can actually collaborate very easily. And we have customers where we've seen all of a sudden dozens of engineers collaborating and debugging within the same cluster in what would have in the past required individual environments for each engineer. And this is actually a huge time saver and a bottleneck unblocker, especially for those expensive and large environments. And the other side of it is that any piece of data you collect is available in Grail, and anybody on your team who has access for it can see that snapshot has been collected, can see where it came from, can see the data, so you can easily share those snapshots and collaborate upon them and consult upon them and so on. Think about how much cooler it is. Instead of having to describe something that went wrong, you can actually take a snapshot of what went wrong and put it on a Jira ticket or on a Slack message and get some feedback on it.
So Liran, one thing I want to ask you is, we've talked about a lot of the live debugging and how it's great and everything, but how do you actually use it? Like, how do we enable it for my environment? Like, what's the process?
You asked me, you're the agent guy. Do I have to install another agent?
I want you to ask me as well.
The architect.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone can answer.
You go ahead. You go ahead. It's a question for you.
Yeah, sure. So let me ask my question. But basically, the answer is fairly simple, right? Usually, you'll only have to enable just two flags in the UI. The first one, you'll have to enable the sensor, the live debugging sensor. It's under developer usability, the sensor itself, and then you will have the live debugging. And the second thing you'll have to enable is the live debugger feature for your particular language, whether it is Java, Node.js, or soon to be .NET, right? One small thing is during your first time, you'll probably need to restart the application when you enable the feature for your specific language. But after that, it should work whether you enable or disable it.
Yeah, we mentioned many goodies towards developer. This one, I think platform engineers and ops related will be anxious to hear that they don't need to go and enable developers one by one or even groups. So it's very, very important. And in general, I think that although we are aiming to help developers, we kind of ease the life of many ops personas as a side effect. Like you mentioned, security, why production is not open. So yes, it's not open, but what happens if we have customer-facing bugs? Then you get developers or VP engineering or whatever asking to get production server access for 1, 2, 3, just for this, just for him, just for a certain amount of time. And that's a hassle and that's a security risk. And what happened when I don't have this log line that I need? Omer, you mentioned it earlier. Then you need to code and push for redeployment. And all of those redeployment, it's not just like one line item in whatever list. It's a hassle and it's money in the end of the day. So removing all those unnecessary redeployments are super helpful for all ops persona that make it possible for us developers to make it to our real-time data in the end of the day. So I think it's also super important application and capabilities to those positions as well. Not to mention that one of the KPIs is MTTR, right? To make sure that it's as minimal as possible.
But it is something nice to have, right? I mean, usually you don't want to
it's not
have
nice to have.
bugs.
Imagine that you have like KPIs that you.
No, it's not. It's nice to have like a low time to debug your issues.
I always like,
right? It's not a KPI,
yeah.
But still, yeah. And one of the things that actually you touched on, Sharon, is that we have talked about deployments, right? Let's say we change one log line, and then we deploy it, and then it should be on, correct?
How long does it take?
But the truth is, that's exactly. Thank you, Liran. Yeah, that's a good question, because we know, like, even in our company, right? Deployments take time. They need to get the correct approvals. They need to go through some hardening phase. They need to be deployed somewhere. All of those things take a lot of time. With the live debugging, what you're also getting is agility. That's like one huge pain point developers have of deploying something takes a whole lot of time. And we're trying to save your time even more.
Yeah, personally, I love it when I've been waiting for half an hour for a new log line, and then the deploy fails, and I have to start all over again.
Yeah. You just scroll into your phone during that time.
Go to have lunch.
Yeah, if you have a CI, if you have a critical incident ongoing, you probably don't go to have lunch when you're waiting on a log line. You're probably.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Executives all over the place. But, depends on your culture, I guess.
I guess. Maybe.
Gary, can you highlight the latest question by Ahmed? So I think we've briefly touched upon that. I think Sharon touched upon the fact that some companies that measure their MTTR and other metrics have shown improvements of up to 20x, and that's pretty damn impressive. I think you mentioned TELUS.
Yes, but not MTTR. The MTTI, like in time to identification, the verification and troubleshooting time.
Yeah.
Not still remediation.
Mm-hmm. And we're also seeing, I think a good benchmark would be to think about how long would it take you to deploy a new log line to production right now. And ideally with not having to wake up half the company for approvals and manual operations, whatever. In an easy course of business, how long would it take you to just add one log line to production or to another environment? Right now, it rarely takes less than a few hours. It can often take a few weeks. Okay. So I think we're just almost wrapping up. So I'd like you guys kind of come up with your latest questions. And until you do, any last thoughts? Sharon, Omer?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add that, like, most products are about selling to someone else, right? And the reason why I like working at Dynatrace especially, but the live debugger specifically, is that I'm working for myself, as egotistically as it sounds, right? I'm creating a product that will actually help me, and I hope actually, that being a customer of myself, you feel that the product is more tailored to your needs and is touching about your real pain points as developers.
From developers to developers.
Yeah.
Well spoken. Yeah,
Very
I think
we have to look out for our own.
I think the nicest thing about live debugging, especially for DPS customers, you can just turn it on with a couple of clicks, as Omer mentioned. Try it out for yourself. There is no commitment, no complications. You can just turn it on, give it a try, see how it goes, and let us know.
We're obviously biased, but exactly, you can just try it for yourself. It used to be black magic. When we showed it to people, they're like, wow, being able to get real-time data from production, super powerful, super helpful. Information is here. We have a lot of resources, blogs, documentation. Just check it out. And if you have questions, we're here for you. Liran, thank you very much for inviting us.
Thanks.
It was fun.
I'm just
always a pleasure talking with you guys.
So thanks everybody for listening in. If you have any follow-up question, then feel free to contact us. Actually, yeah, we have the community, we have the support channels. You can chat with your account executives, and just reach out. We'll be happy to chat with you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.